Good morning. We are going to finish Max today. Excited to share the final chapter, chapter 7, Max, the incredible true story. George placed Max gently in the back of the station wagon on a clean, soft blanket spread over his foam rubber mattress. Hildy switched from the back of the car to the passenger seat in the middle, did not object. She settled herself between the boys and then, sticking her long muzzle through the grate separating the dog compartment from the rest of the station wagon, she sniffed Maxie and licked his nose. Maxie barely lifted his eyelids. "Goodbye, Dr. Merrill. Thank you for your help," we said. "Let me know how Maxie's doing," the doctor smiled, waving us on our way. "Get him to the clinic as fast as you can. He is very weak." George started the engine. For the fourth time within a month, we were driving along the same country road, bordered along both sides by endless fruit orchards. The blossoms were gone now. The trees had the uniformity of well-trained regiments lined up for a parade. There was practically no traffic on our side of the road. Most people were now safely home from work and were having dinner and watching television. Many cars were moving from the opposite direction, people leaving Los Angeles and Bakersfield on their way to a weekend in the mountains. But that traffic didn't affect our progress. George drove fast, exceeding the speed limit of 55 miles per hour. But we had no choice. Maxie was sinking fast. We stopped before getting on a freeway and checked him. He could not lift his head. I washed his face and mouth with cool water, noticing that his gums looked gray and his teeth, once sparkling white and menacingly sharp, now were covered with a yellowish, odorous film. "We must hurry," I said on the verge of tears again. "I think he is dying." "Not my Maxie," George exclaimed fiercely. "Not after all he's been through. No, my Maxie is not going to give up when help is so near." He stepped on the accelerator. Hildy tried to lick Maxie through the metal grill, but Max was oblivious to her attempts of welcoming him back. He breathed fast. His bare ribcage moved up and down like a set of bellows. "I think we're going to get a ticket," George said, looking at the rearview mirror. He maneuvered the car to the right side of the freeway and stopped on the shoulder of the road. A California Highway Patrol car pulled up behind us. "May I see your driver's license, please?" A young patrolman came to the window. George quietly handed over his license. "Did you know you were speeding, sir?" he asked politely. "Yes, officer, I am aware of it," George replied. "Officer, we had to hurry," Francisco interrupted, his voice full of tears. "We have a dying dog in the back. We must take him to the vet in Los Angeles or he will die." The officer looked at Francisco, surprised at his outburst. He was young, perhaps the same age as our son, Ron. "Just take a look in the back," I joined, encouraged by his kind young face. "Just take a look at our poor dog." George came out of the car and went to the back of it, the officer following. George lifted the rear door of the car and the patrolman peered in. "You poor beast," he said softly to Maxie. "What happened to you? Were you hit by a car?" "He was lost for 3 weeks in the mountains, in the forest." The boys hurried to inform the officer, feeling the presence of a kind person. "He has 2 broken legs, a broken hip, and he is practically starved to death. We are trying to save his life by taking him to the animal hospital in Los Angeles." "That's why I was speeding," George said. "All I have on my mind is saving my dog." "I don't blame you," the young patrolman said. "I have a dog myself, a Labrador Retriever. I understand how you feel. I'll tell you what. Follow me closely. I'll take you as fast as I can to the boundaries of my territory. Then I'll radio to my buddies along the freeway to let you pass. I'll be breaking the law, but sometimes one has to do that to save a life. Follow me." He returned to his car and veered in front of us. He turned on the revolving red light on the roof of his car and waved for us to follow. "I can't believe it," George exclaimed. "A cop helping us to break the law so that we could save Maxie's life." Bless him, I thought. May he, his Labrador Retriever, his wife, his children, if he has any, live happily forever and ever. "Thank you, officer," the children yelled as the young policeman smiled at them. We sped after the patrolman, passing car after car, following closely behind his flashing light. In about 40 minutes, he switched off his light and motioned us to continue as he changed lanes, bearing to the right. We understood that he had come to the boundaries of his territory. I waved to him and blew him a kiss as we passed him. He grinned and waved back and drove away at the next freeway exit. "We didn't even ask his name," I said. "Shall we continue to drive faster than the speed limit?" George asked. "Yes," I said sadly. "The patrolman said he would radio ahead to his buddies." "He will," the boys cried from the back seat. "He's a nice guy." "What the heck? Let's try it," George said, keeping his speed steady at 65. We drove for another 40 or 50 minutes, passing car after truck, getting nearer to the city and the clinic. Max still breathed fast. Except for his breathing, he looked dead. Far ahead of us, we saw a long line of vehicles moving at a lesser speed behind a police car that was pacing them. "Shall we take a chance and overtake them and risk getting a ticket?" George asked, answering himself with, "Yes, we'll take a chance." Steadily he drove, 10 miles per hour faster than the convoy. We began to pass the cars, one by one, the drivers reacting to our nerve with various degrees of puzzlement at our behavior or with smug expressions. They were all good, law-abiding citizens, while we were the outlaws who were about to get our comeuppances. I was sure that many of them were waiting with glee to see the pacing patrol car chase after us. We overtook them all until we all pulled abreast of the leading patrol car. There were 2 men in the car, the older one driving. They glanced at us, first in amazement at our daring to go by them so boldly. Then they said something to one another, and the younger one checked a slip of paper on his dashboard. It all happened so fast, but I thought I saw them smiling at us. Yes, they did smile, and the younger one made a peace sign with his 2 fingers. I saw it in my visor mirror. He did radio his buddies, the boys cried triumphantly. We knew he would. For the second time that day, I heard the phrase, "It renews your faith in the human race." As George said it, an amused smile crossed his tired face. Twice again we passed patrol cars, and each time we were waved on. Do you suppose he radioed our license number and the description of our car to all the highway patrolmen along the freeway? I asked. It certainly looks like it, George replied. It was dark by the time we reached Los Angeles, but we reached it in a record time of less than 3 hours. The West Los Angeles Veterinary Medical Clinic was situated in a new building with all the latest conveniences of a modern hospital. Both my husband, a doctor, and later our son, almost a doctor, commented that they would not mind practicing in such a fine facility. It had its own operating rooms, x-ray department, pharmacy, laboratory, several examining rooms, the latest computerized filing equipment, and many other features undoubtedly unseen by outsiders. It was spotlessly clean, and it was staffed by several young veterinarians of various specialties. It operated on a 24-hour basis with an emphasis on emergency medicine. A young woman, Dr. Dor Osdi, was on duty. "Oh, you poor, poor creature," she exclaimed when George and a young lady attendant lifted Maxie onto the examining table. You are on your last legs. Figuratively and actually speaking, my husband commented. What happened to him? Briefly, we described what we knew about Maxie's ordeal. Do you want to put him to sleep? Or do you want to try to save him? Dr. Osdy asked. Of course we want to save him, we all cried in unison. Then George elaborated. We feel that we want to do everything that is possible to save his life and to restore his health. This dog means a lot to us. We have had him since he was 7 weeks old. We trained him, we nursed him through his unpleasant weeks of healing after the ears were cropped. We love him. He's a remarkable dog. He understands 30 or 35 different words. We can't desert him now. And when he really needs us, after he was struggling for his life with such valiance. He even understands Spanish, Francisco volunteered, and French, and German, and Russian, Carlos interrupted, unwilling to be overshadowed by his sibling. Must be a remarkable dog, the veterinary smiled at the boys. We can't put him to sleep, I joined my husband. After this dog fought so bravely to survive, we must give him a chance to live. For us, saving Maxie's life had become a must, a symbol of the value of life itself. Maxie is more than a pet to us. He is a friend, a child. I understand perfectly, the doctor said as she petted Maxie's head. If he were my dog, I would make the same decision. But you realize, of course, that he might be a cripple forever. Looking briefly at his x-rays, it seems to me that he will have to have a metal pin or a plate in his hip. We don't care if he is a cripple, I exclaimed. We love him for what he is. So he won't win any blue ribbons, my husband said. He still is a champion with me. He surely is, the doctor agreed. If he only could tell us exactly what happened to him, what a tale it would be. She took Maxie's temperature. It was normal. It's a good sign, she said. Tomorrow, we'll take more x-rays. We'll put him on antibiotics and anabolic steroids and on a special high-protein diet. We have to build up his strength before we attempt surgery. We will also check his blood and urine. There's one of the very few pictures in this book. What about his sores? I asked. We'll clean them and put some special salve on them. They'll heal. The sores are one of his lesser problems. We'll do everything for him that modern veterinary medicine has to offer, but it will be very costly. Multiple surgeries, anesthesia, x-rays, lab work, maybe even intensive post-operative care. I realize it, my husband said, but I want this dog saved at all cost. We petted Maxie as the attendant carried him away. The next few days will be crucial, Dr. Osdy said. Keep in touch with us by phone, but I would advise you not to visit him. We'll keep him under mild sedation so that we can run a series of tests on him. We'll let you know if anything unusual happens, so try not to worry. All right, doctor. Thank you. We left the hospital. Max was placed in a large cage with layers of clean newspapers on the floor. A metal cup full of fresh water was attached to the inside of the cage at a level where the dog could drink without standing on his feet. Thirstily, Max lapped the water. Then he closed his eyes again. He felt peaceful. Although his masters and the boys had left, somehow he understood that he was not abandoned and that someone else would be taking care of his hurting, battered body. He felt a sharp prick of a needle in his neck as the doctor gave him an injection to relax him and to relieve the pain. After that, he slept until morning. The next day, the team of doctors and attendants began their fight for Maxie's life. He was fed vitamins and antibiotics and steroids and intravenous fluids to bring his blood chemistry back to its necessary balance. His limbs were x-rayed and the films were read. He was fed a special diet in small portions several times a day. His temperature and bodily functions were checked, and the attendants watched over him 24 hours a day. Maxie submitted meekly to the needles and the x-rays, as if understanding the people who hovered around him were his friends. He probably did not miss us, for he was in a constant state of semi-sedation. But we missed him and worried over him greatly. We called the hospital daily, getting complete reports on his progress from the girls at the reception desk, sympathetic to Maxie's plight. Our friends teased us that we ought to send flowers to the hospital. Never mind, George was saying. Everyone is pulling for Maxie. He has become a cause célèbre. On the 5th day after his admission to the hospital, Max finally regained enough strength to undergo surgery. We called the hospital twice, but he was still in the operating room. Finally, after 6 hours of surgery, our Maxie was back in his cage. We were told that we could visit him the following day. George had to leave that day for a medical meeting in Florida. The boys and I took him to the airport, and then we met our son Ron, who also wanted to see Maxie. The boys had a present for Maxie, a patty of lean ground beef. The attendants led us into the ward. Every cage was occupied. In one cage, we saw a fluffy Siberian husky wearing a huge round collar that looked like a high starched collar of Queen Elizabeth I. The dog was somewhat embarrassed wearing this collar, but it prevented the animal from licking and pulling out the stitches on her belly. Another dog sported a cast up to his shoulder, while still another had bristling metal stitches on its neck. And then we saw our Max. His front leg was in a splint up to his shoulder, and his right hip and the right hind leg were encased in an elaborate bandage that encircled his abdomen. The fur on the hind part of his body was shaved off, and the skin beneath looked dry and gray and lifeless. He recognized us and whined. We knelt at his cage and called his name. "Look what we brought for you, Maxie," the boys said. "Are you hungry?" Hearing the familiar word, hungry, Maxie gave us a single bark, his usual reply to this question. It was a weak bark, far from his usual ringing, assertive sound, but it was a bark, nevertheless, an answer. "He did not forget," I exclaimed, delighted with Maxie's reaction. All these past days, George and I speculated and worried whether Maxie's mental condition had grown worse along with his physical state. Would he be able to understand us as before, when, by the tone of our voices alone, or even a hand signal, our highly trained dog had known exactly what was expected of him? Would he obey us? Or was he so badly hurt physically that his mind had suffered damage beyond repair? His little feeble bark at the right time, sedated as he was, made us sure that Maxie was his own smart, dear self again, and that nothing was wrong with his mental ability. He gobbled up the meat, not caring to chew it. He licked Ron's hands, recognizing him also, although he did not see him too often. Ron, being a young man of 23 and almost a doctor himself, no longer lived with us. It was time to go. Maxie. We thanked the doctors and the attendants for all they had done for Maxie. "Oh, Maxie is our favorite," one of them said. "He became the symbol of courage to us. We all pull for him. He'll be okay. He's a tough guy." He must have been in perfect condition to be able to come out alive from such an ordeal. "Oh, yes, he used to be the most muscular dog I have ever seen," Ron said. "He was as fast as a racing dog," Carlos added. "He'll race again, maybe on 3 legs only, but without complications. He'll race again." The attendant ruffled Carlos's hair in a friendly gesture. He might not win any races, but he'll race again. You'll see. Max stayed in the hospital for 2 more weeks. When we finally brought him home, a telegram was waiting, addressed to Maxie Wayne. "Welcome home, Maxie," he said. It said. It was signed by our friends, Dr. and Mrs. Goldsmith, and their 3 children. Then another telegram came from Mexico. The parents of our house guests wished to congratulate Max upon his miraculous recovery. "I told you Max is becoming a celebrity," my husband laughed. "I even have a welcome home present for him from one of my patients." "What is it?" "A case of dog food. My patient works at a supermarket, so he brought me a whole case of specially nutritious dog food for Maxie." How sweet of him. Everybody seemed to be delighted with Max's deliverance. Our neighbors, our mailman, our gardener, they all wanted to know how Maxie pulled through such a terrible ordeal. Hildy greeted Max with gentle curiosity. She licked his nose, but then, as if understanding that he wasn't well, she stayed at a distance. Maxie recognized the house at once. He limped on 3 legs from room to room, sniffing at the furniture and sleeping in the library on his favorite spot on the rug. Hildy respectfully stayed out of his way. Isn't it amazing that this frisky, lively puppy understands that her mate is unable to play with her? She actually acts as if she knows what's going on. Maybe she does. Who knows what goes on between the animals? There must be something natural that allows them to communicate with one another. I'm going to go ahead and end there for today. It's a lot more than I thought it was. I read ahead and thought I could finish it, but we will have chapter 8 tomorrow. Remember, it's cool to be kind. Hard work makes you feel good. And always ask, what can I do to help? Make it a great day. Ciao.